Go.
Okay, so the transect starts here in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, and the initial leg is going to be through the southern prairies, along the southern tier of Lake Superior to Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan. And we're collecting water samples along the route here, and then down through Michigan, past the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and over into central New York, Syracuse, where you guys are located. After that, we're going to head off into Ontario through Niagara Falls, up along the Bruce Peninsula, which is marl country, limestone outcrops through that region. And we took a look at a few marl lakes there, and we run through the Precambrian rock, the banded iron formations of northern Lake Superior, and across Ontario back into more limestone terrain. Now this whole region here consists of limestone outcrops, which is why our transect runs through that region. We're going to be looking at the isotope value of the water and investigating lakes for marl sampling. So we come up through Manitoba, back through Saskatoon, and then we're going to go out to the Canadian Rockies, a place called Canmore, which is adjacent to Banff in the Canadian Rockies. Up through the Rockies, across the high prairies, Alberta, and then into the Northwest Territories, and up to the town of Yellowknife on the Great Slave Lake. Okay, there are a number of marl lakes in this area that we're very interested in as well. So we took a look at those, grabbed a few samples from those lakes of both the mud and the water. We come back down to the south, and here's where we hit the most challenging stretch of the trip. This is the Mackenzie Highway here, which is not too bad of a dirt road. But south here, we're on the Fort Laird Trail, and this is probably the worst road I've ever ridden on. And it's definitely the worst road Bob's ever ridden on. Deep, silty, sandy stuff with big rocks hidden in it. Like wrestling a bear for 3 hours. So we got through that section, and then we head west and north through British Columbia to the Yukon. And you hit the Yukon right around Watson Lake here. And subsequently, we travel up through the Yukon, Whitehorse, then to Dawson City, both famous for the gold rush in the late 1890s of the last century. And then we take top of the world highway over to Boundary, Alaska, and then Chicken, Alaska, and then down to the town of Tuk in Alaska, which is mostly a tourist trap, and then on down to Anchorage, Alaska, to the westernmost point of our transect. And from Anchorage, we head south to Seward, named after the Secretary of the Treasury in the 1860s who bought Alaska for $7 million. Originally, it was considered a mistake until gold and other minerals worth a lot of money were found there. So this is the terminus of our western transect. We then backtrack a little bit to Tuk, and then we take the Alaskan Highway to Watson Lake again, and then we're taking the Cassiar Highway through British Columbia. Now, occasionally along this transect we run into limestone terrain, such as the limestone terrain here at Emerald Lake. There's another lake about a kilometer away to the east called Spirit Lake, which is going to be a marl lake too, we strongly suspect. And up the road about 20 kilometers ago we went past Lewes Lake, which is also a marl lake. So we're coming back into British Columbia later today, and then we're going to continue down through Belle II Crossing, Prince George, Kelowna, and then into the northern tier of the US eventually. We'll probably cross into northern Montana here, and so a little bit of a divergence from this original map here. Head down through Montana, through Yellowstone Park, Cody, Wyoming, across Wyoming into South Dakota, and then that's where I head north again towards Saskatoon, and Bob is on his own east back to Syracuse. You'll see a couple other transects here that we have done just prior to this trip. These are two that go into Gillian, Manitoba, and Lynn Lake to the west here. We have a transect here to Wood Buffalo National Park in eastern Alberta, and I did a transect up here in northern Saskatchewan to Stony Rapids, the worst road in North America, about the last 200 kilometers here. So you can see from this map we've got pretty good coverage so far. Subsequent to this trip, in about 3 weeks, I will be taking yet another trip to the west and running on the west coast of North America, and then back up through the Rockies and to Saskatoon. So spiderweb looking thing here should give us pretty good coverage of how moisture is cycling from the Gulf of Mexico here up the Mississippi embayment into the west, from the Pacific, and down from the Arctic. Now, most people would suspect that moisture is coming from the west here and simply moving to the east. When you watch the Weather Channel or the Weather Network in Canada, you'll see storms progressing to the east. What you can think of that as a rope. You take a rope and flip it, put a wave in that rope. The rope doesn't actually move anywhere, but the wave does. So moisture is coming from the south and east mostly, with some supplementary moisture coming from the west and some coming from the north. All of this moves in packets across North America in this wave in your rope. And what we're doing by taking samples all over, wherever we can get to by road, is coming up with a budget. And we'll look at how the moisture moves across the continent in this direction, how much of it comes from the north, how much of it's coming from the south, and you even get a little bit of it coming from the east and heading west. So all of these things hopefully will be clearer once we complete this study later in the fall. That's all I have to say about that.